Hi everyone, welcome back. Happy Monday to you all. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and got a chance to get outside and enjoy that beautiful sunshine and some of that hotter weather. It's warming up out there, starting to feel like summer, but we still have some really great weeks planned here in second grade before that happens. But for now, I wanted to welcome you back to our story. We're going to jump back on into James and the Giant Peach, written by Roald Dahl. If you remember where we left off in the story, we had James and everyone all bundled up, holding on tight, and that Peach was rolling down off the hill, straight on over Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker, and headed off to, well, we're not sure where. Somewhere amazing, they are certain, but so far, we have no idea. So we're going to go ahead and jump on into our story and find out where exactly the Peach lands today. So we left off with chapter 16. And now, the Peach had broken out of the garden and was over the edge of the hill, rolling and bouncing down the steep slope at a terrific pace. Faster and faster and faster it went, and the crowds of people who were climbing up the hill suddenly caught sight of this terrible monster plunging down upon them, and they screamed and scattered to the right and left as it went hurtling by. That would be quite a sight to be seen. At the bottom of the hill, it charged across the road, knocking over a telegraph pole, much like a telephone pole, and flattening two parked cars as it went by. Then it rushed madly across 20 fields, breaking down the fences and hedges in its path. It went right through the middle of a herd of fine Jersey cows, and then through a flock of sheep, and then through a paddock full of horses. I know, Milo. Be careful. That would be surprising if it went through a paddock full of horses. I can only imagine. They'd be running everywhere. Donkeys, too. This giant Peach upon them. And then through a yard full of pigs, and soon the whole countryside was a seething mass of panic-stricken animals stampeding in all directions. All those fences down, all those animals on the loose. Oh my goodness. The Peach was still going at a tremendous speed with no sign of slowing down, and about a mile farther on it came to a village. Uh-oh. Milo, I don't like the sounds of this. Down the main street of the village it rolled, with people leaping frantically out of its path right and left, and at the end of the street it went crashing right through the wall of an enormous building and out the other side, leaving two gaping round holes in the brickwork. This building happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate. Now pause button. If you have read some of Roald Dahl's other books, listen carefully to these clues. The building happened to be a famous factory where they made chocolate, and almost at once a great river of warm melted chocolate came pouring out of the holes of the factory wall. A minute later, this brown, sticky mess was flowing through every street in the village, oozing under doors of houses and into people's shops and gardens. Children were wading into it up to their knees, and some were even trying to swim in it, and all of them were sucking it into their mouths in great greedy gulps and shrieks with joy. It does remind us a little of Roald Dahl's other book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. If you haven't checked out that story just yet, it's definitely one to recommend. It is fantastic, too. Rivers of chocolate and very imaginative and adventurous, just as we know Roald Dahl likes to write. But let's continue with the Peach. But the Peach rushed on across the countryside, on and on and on, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Cowsheds, stables, pigsties, barns, bungalows, hayricks, anything that got in its way went toppling over like a 9-pin bowling pin. An old man sitting quietly beside a stream had his fishing rod whisked right out of his hands as it went dashing by, and a woman called Daisy and Twistle was standing so close to it as it passed that she had the skin taken right off the tip of her nose. Would it ever stop? Why should it? A round object, a sphere, of course, will always keep on rolling as long as it's on a downhill slope. And in this case, the land was sloped downhill all the way until it reached the ocean. The same ocean that James had begged his aunts to be allowed to visit the day before. Well, perhaps he was going to visit now. The Peach was rushing closer and closer to it every second, and closer also to the towering white cliffs that came first. These cliffs are the most famous in the whole of England, and they are hundreds of feet high. Below them, the sea is deep and cold and hungry. Many ships have been swallowed up and lost forever on this part of the coast, and all the men who were in them as well. The Peach was now only 100 yards away from the cliff, now 50, now 20, now 10, now 5, and when it reached the edge of the cliff, it seemed to leap into the sky and hang there, suspended for a few seconds, still turning over and over in the air. Then, can you picture this? It began to fall. Down, 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 smack! It hit the water with a colossal splash and sank like a stone. Here's that scene. Peach, giant cliffs, down it goes. But a few seconds later it came up again, and this time up it stayed, floating serenely upon the surface of the water. James got his wish after all. He's there at the ocean. Except, of course, nothing is ever as it seems, and there's a lot of this story left. Chapter 17. At this moment, the scene inside the Peach itself was one of indescribable chaos. James Henry Trotter was lying bruised and battered on the floor of the room amongst a tangled mass of centipede and earthworm and spider and ladybug and glowworm and old green grasshopper. In the whole history of the world, no travelers had ever had a more terrible journey than these unfortunate creatures. It had started out well with much laughing and shouting, and for the first few seconds, as the Peach had begun to roll slowly forward, no one had minded being tumbled about a bit. And when it went bump, the centipede had shouted, "That was Aunt Sponge!" And then bump again, and that was Aunt Spiker. There had been a tremendous burst of cheering all around. But as soon as the Peach rolled out of the garden and began to go down the steep hill, rushing and plunging and bounding madly downward, then the whole thing became a nightmare. James found himself being flung up against the ceiling, then back down onto the floor, then sideways against the wall, then up onto the ceiling again, and up and down and back and forth and round, and at the same time, all the other creatures were flying through the air in every direction too. And so were the chairs and the sofa, not to mention the 42 boots belonging to the centipede. Everything and all of them were being rattled around like peas inside an enormous rattle that was being rattled by a mad giant who refused to stop. To make it worse, something went wrong with the glowworm's lighting system, and the room was in pitchy darkness. There were screams and yells and cries of pain, and everything kept going round and round and round. And once James made a frantic grab at some thick bars hanging out from the wall, only to find out they were actually a couple of centipede's legs. Uh-oh. "Let go of me!" shouted the centipede, kicking himself free, and James was promptly flung across the room into Old Green Grasshopper's horny lap. Twice he got tangled up in Miss Spider's legs, a horrid business, and toward the end, the poor earthworm, who was cracking himself like a whip every time he flew through the air from one side of the room to the other, coiled himself around James's body in a panic and refused to unwind. Oh, it was frantic and a terrible trip. But it was all over now, and the room was suddenly very still and quiet. Everybody was beginning slowly and painfully to disentangle himself from everybody else. "Let's have some light!" cried the centipede. "Yes," they cried, "light! Give us some light!" "I'm trying," answered the poor glowworm. "I'm doing the best I can. Please be patient." They all waited in silence. Then a faint greenish light began to glimmer out of the glowworm's tail, and this gradually became stronger and stronger until it was anyway enough to see by. "Some great journey," the centipede said, limping across the room. "I shall never be the same again," murmured the earthworm. "Nor I," said the ladybug. "It's taken years off my life." "But my dear friends," cried the old green grasshopper, trying to be cheerful, "we are there." "Where?" they asked. "Where? Where is there?" "I don't know," the old green grasshopper said, "but I'll bet it's somewhere good." "We are probably at the bottom of a coal mine," the earthworm said gloomily. "We certainly went down and down and down very suddenly at the last moment. I felt it in my stomach. I still feel it." Perhaps you're in the middle of a beautiful country full of songs and music, the old green grasshopper said. Or near the seashore, said James eagerly, with lots of other children down on the sand for me to play with. Pardon me, murmured the ladybug, turning a trifle pale. But am I wrong in thinking that we seem to be bobbing up and down? Bobbing up and down, they cried. What on earth do you mean? You're still giddy from the journey, the old green grasshopper told her. You'll get over it in a minute. Is everybody ready to go upstairs now and take a look around? Yes, yes, they chorused. Come on, let's go. I refuse to show myself outdoors in my bare feet, the centipede said. I have to get my boots on again first. For heaven's sake. Let's not go through all that nonsense again, the earthworm said. Let's all lend the centipede a hand and get it over with, the ladybug said. Come on. So they did, all except for Miss Spider, who set about weaving a long rope ladder that they could use to reach the top floor, that would reach from the floor up to a hole in the ceiling, The old green grasshopper had wisely said that they must not risk going out of the side entrance, where they didn't know where they were, but must first all go up onto the top of the peach and have a look around. Really very wise words. So half an hour later, when the rope ladder had been finished and hung, and the 42nd boot had been placed neatly onto Centipede's 42nd foot, they were all ready to go out. Amidst mounting excitement and shouts of, "Here we go! The promised land! I can't wait to see it!" The whole company climbed up the ladder one by one and disappeared into a dark, soggy tunnel in the ceiling that went steeply, almost vertically, upward. Chapter 18. A minute later, they were out in the open, standing on the very top of the peach near the stem, blinking their eyes in the strong sunlight and peering nervously around. What happened? Where are we? But this is impossible, unbelievable, terrible. I told you we were bobbing up and down, the ladybug said. We're in the middle of the sea, cried James. And indeed they were. A strong current and high wind had carried the peach so quickly away from the shore that already the land was out of sight. All around them lay the vast black ocean, deep and hungry. Little waves were bobbing against the sides of the peach. But how did it happen, they cried. Where are the fields? Where are the woods? Where is England? Nobody, not even James, could understand how in the world a thing like this could have come about. Ladies and gentlemen, the old green grasshopper said, trying very hard to keep the fear and disappointment out of his voice. I am afraid that we find ourselves in a rather awkward situation. Awkward, cried the earthworm. My dear old grasshopper, we are finished. Everyone knows I'm about to perish. I may be blind, you know, but that much I can see quite clearly. Off with my boots, shouted the centipede. I cannot swim with my boots on. I cannot swim at all, cried the ladybug. Nor can I, wailed the glowworm. Nor I, said Miss Spider. None of us three girls here can swim a single stroke. But you won't have to swim, said James calmly. We are floating beautifully, and sooner or later a ship is bound to come along and pick us up. They all stared at him in amazement. Are you quite sure that we are not sinking? The ladybug asked. Of course I'm sure, answered James. Go ahead and look for yourself. They all ran over to the side of the peach and peered down at the water below. The boy is quite right, the old green grasshopper said. We are floating beautifully. Now we must all sit down and keep perfectly calm. Everything will be all right in the end. What absolute nonsense, cried the earthworm. Nothing is ever all right in the end, and, well, you know it. Poor earthworm, the ladybug said, whispering in James's ears. He loves to make everything into a disaster. He hates to be happy. He is only happy when he is gloomy. Now, isn't that odd? But then, I suppose just being an earthworm is enough to make a person pretty gloomy. Don't you agree? If this peach is not going to sink, the earthworm was saying, and if we are not going to be drowned, then every one of us is going to starve to death instead. Do you realize that we haven't had a thing to eat since yesterday morning? By golly, he's right, cried the centipede. For once, earthworm is right. Of course I'm right, the earthworm said, and we're not likely to find anything around here either. We shall get thinner and thinner and thirstier, and we shall die a slow and grisly death from starvation. I am dying already. I am slowly shriveling up for want of food. Personally, I would rather drown. But good heavens, you must be blind, said James. You know very well that I am blind, snapped the earthworm. You don't need to rub it in. I didn't mean it that way, said James quickly. I'm sorry, but can't you see that? See? Shouted the poor earthworm. How can I see if I am blind, James? James took a deep, slow breath. Can't you realize, he said patiently, that we have enough food here to last us for weeks and weeks? Where? They said, where? Why, the Peach, of course. Our whole ship is made of food. Oh my goodness, they cried. We'd never thought of that. My dear James, said the old green grasshopper, laying a front leg affectionately on James's shoulder. I don't know what we'd do without you. You are so clever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are saved again. We are most certainly not, said the earthworm. You must be crazy. We can't eat the ship. It's the only thing that's keeping us up. We shall starve if we don't, said the centipede. And we shall drown if we do, cried the earthworm. Oh dear, said the old green grasshopper. Now we're worse off than before. Couldn't we eat just a little bit of it? Asked Miss Spider. I am so dreadfully hungry. You can eat all you want, James answered. It would take us weeks and weeks to make any sort of dent in this enormous peach. Surely you can see that. Good heavens, he's right, cried the old green grasshopper, clapping his hands. It would take weeks and weeks. Of course it would, but let's not go making a lot of holes all over the deck. I'm thinking we'd better simply scoop it out of the tunnel over here, and the one that we've just come up by. An excellent idea, said the ladybug. What are you looking so worried about, earthworm, for? The centipede said. What's the problem? The problem is, the earthworm said, the problem is that there's no problem. Everyone burst out laughing. Cheer up, earthworm, they said. Come and eat. And they all went over to the tunnel entrance and began scooping out great chunks of juicy, golden-colored peach flesh. Oh, marvelous, said the centipede, stuffing it into his mouth. Delicious, said the old green grasshopper. Just fabulous, said the glowworm. Oh my, said the ladybug primly. What a heavenly taste. She looked up at James, and she smiled, and James smiled back at her. They sat down on the deck together, both of them chewing away happily. You know, James, the ladybug said, up until this moment, I have never in my life tasted anything except those tiny little green flies that live on rose bushes. They have a perfectly delightful flavor, but peach is even better. Isn't it glorious? Miss Spider said, coming over to join them. Personally, I had always thought that a big, juicy, caught-in-the-web bluebottle was the finest dinner in the world until I tasted this. Bluebottle must be an insect, right? What a flavor, the centipede cried. It's terrific. There's nothing like it. There never has been. And I should know because I personally have tasted all the finest foods in the world. Whereupon the centipede, with his mouth full of peach, with juice rushing down over his chin, suddenly burst into song. Now, I'm not sure I can sing this one for you, but I'll go ahead and read it for you. I've eaten many strange and scrumptious dishes in my time, like jellied gnats and dandy prats and earwigs cooked in slime. And mice with rice, they're really nice when roasted in their prime, but don't forget to sprinkle them with just a pinch of brine. I've eaten fresh mud burgers by the greatest cooks there are, and scrambled dregs and stink bug eggs and hornets stewed in tar, and pails and snails and lizard tails and beetles by the jar. A beetle is improved by just a splash of vinegar. I often eat boiled slobbages, they're grand when served beside minced doodlebugs and curried slugs, and have you ever tried mosquitoes' toes and wampus roes most delicately fried? The only trouble is that they do disagree with my inside. I'm mad for crispy wasp stings on a piece of buttered toast, and pickled spines of porcupines, and then a gorgeous roast of dragon's flesh, well hung, not fresh. It costs $1 at most. and comes to you in barrels if you only order it by post. I crave the tasty tentacles of octopi for tea. I like hot dogs, I love hot frogs, and surely you'll agree. A plate of soil with engine's oil, a super recipe. I hardly need to mention that it's practically free. For dinner on my birthday, shall I tell you what I choose? Hot noodles made from poodles on a slice of garden hose, and a rather smelly jelly made of armadillo's toes. The jelly is delicious, but you have to hold your nose. Now comes, the centipede declared, the burden of my speech. These foods are rare beyond compare, some are right out of reach. But there's no doubt I'd go without a million plates of each for one small mite, one tiny bite of this fantastic peach. Everybody was feeling happy now. The sun was shining brightly out of a soft blue sky, and the day was calm. The giant peach with the sunlight glinting on its side was like a massive golden ball sailing upon a silver sea. And I'll stop you there with a happy bunch. The peach is finally settled, and there they are floating along in the sea, which at first seemed like a big problem, but they found some solutions. They have food to eat, they have the things they need, and they'll just wait it out until a ship comes along. Except, of course, there's always more to the story than that. I will catch you up on that tomorrow, but for now, I'll just remind you to keep checking our Google Classroom for updates. Remember, we have sign-up sheets for our meets on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday this week, so be sure to check that out. And don't forget that prizes from bingo should be in the mail, so if you haven't come across that just yet, be sure to be checking your mailbox. That should be coming soon. For now, I'll leave you with that and a reminder just to look for moments where you can show caring and kindness to one another. Keep up the great work, my friends, and I'll see you all soon. Bye, guys.